Welcome back to the Fear and Beer podcast,
where we discuss all things Halloween Horror Nights, horror movies, and just a little bit of beer.
So kill the lights, grab a cold one, and join us as we dive into this mad world we love.
I'm Nick.
I'm Seamus.
And I'm Jamie.
Like scary movies.
Uh-huh.
Here's Johnny.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Did you miss me?
Aren't you drinking?
I never drink. Why?
And as a reminder to all listening, if you want to help us to continue growing as a podcast, don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on whichever streaming platform you use.
To stay up to date with us and all of our episodes, be sure to follow all of our socials. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Fear and Beer Pod.
Feel free to reach out to us. We love to interact with you all.
And welcome back. I hope everybody is safe out there. We fared pretty well in Orlando, thankfully, where we were. So we're actually able to record this week. And I think we were off last week, and then the previous episode before, we were also talking about, I think it was the other hurricane, Helene, before that, and fitting we're back on the heels of another hurricane. So hopefully everyone that's listening is safe and well. We hope everyone fared good in this one. I know the coast got a little bit more beat up than we did in Orlando. There's still flooding and outages and stuff like that, but I think the brunt of it definitely was on the West Coast versus where we are. So inland in Orlando, we're a little bit of a little bit safer generally, but I know me and Jamie fared well. We really just nothing more than the typical trees and brush and all that bullshit. But Seamus, how'd you ended up okay over there as well?
Yeah, we're fine.
Yeah, thankfully it really didn't hit too hard. So this week we're going to take a look back. We know the season's not complete yet, but we want to take a look back and compare this season versus last season. I think we've gone enough this year to kind of be able to dissect it a little bit further and kind of hold it up in comparison with what we saw last year. So we'll talk, scare zones versus scare zones, IPs versus IPs, originals versus originals. There's really no winner or loser, but just thought it would be fun to sort of talk about these 2 years and hold them up into different standards and compare them. So before we get into that, we do have a couple announcements. I think since the last time we've talked, there's been a couple things going on. Last week we did, I believe, or last 2 weeks ago, we did talk about the Helping Pups episode. That episode was put together by the folks over at Catacombs of Halloween Horror Nights, joined up with HHN365, the RIP Tour, and Horror Nights Gauntlet, and Pangolin. They all banded together to record this monster 3-hour episode to help us chip away at the bills of Daisy's surgery. And, she's doing great. She's doing fine. She's about just over 4 weeks out of surgery. So she's doing good. But if you do want access to that episode, you can head to the link in our bio. It goes to the GoFundMe page, where if you do a donation of at least $5, you will be sent all the information on how to get this episode. So if you are interested in that, follow the link on our bio. You can find all the information there. Now into the fun stuff. We alluded to these last time, but we hadn't announced them. But since they are now announced, let's talk about them. HHN Trivia is back and bigger and better than ever. We are teaming up again with just a whole bunch of everybody. We got Horror Nights Gauntlet, HHN365, Catacombs, RIP Tour, Rush of Fear Pod, and Haunt Girls. We are still figuring out who from each pod is going to be there, but it's going to be, people from the podcasts listed there hosting trivia alongside us. That will be on October 21st, 2024 at 8 p.m. I don't know why I said the year. Obviously, it's this year. But then we're going to host that again at Topgolf Orlando. That is right on Universal Boulevard, right on iDrive area. So come on out, 8 o'clock, October 21st. Get there early because seats fill up pretty quick for this thing. So we're going to work on some prizes. We're going to get some really cool stuff for you. And also our friends over at Murder on Main and DOA are going to be there selling some merchandise as well. So yeah, it's going to be a big, big blowout. But that's what we got going. Seamus, do you want to talk about the other event that we have? I know I'm throwing you kind of on the hot seat if you want to pull up
Yeah, because I'm not even sure. So you're talking about the thing at Mel Mushroom?
Yeah. So yeah, I figured I was talking for a while. So if you want, you
No,
go
it's fine.
head over. So for Seamus and the listeners, you can head to our Instagram to find the information on both of these events. They're pinned to the top of our page. So like I said, we got Horror Nights trivia on October 21st. That is a Monday. We try to plan these on non-HHN events nights. Obviously, with the storm canceling now 2 nights, I'm not sure if they're gonna bump any of the nights to that Monday. But as of right now, it's a HHN free night. And I did forget to mention. When you come, we're doing 20% off food and non-alcoholic beverages for, we put on the poster HHN characters just because we figured that was the majority of the people that would see this. But if you just work at Horror Nights in some capacity, we'll honor that discount as well for you. The way you're going to do that is you're just going to show me proof of you working there, and I'm going to give you a little wristband, and then the server at the end of the night will know to apply that discount to your tab. So that's what we got for our Horror Nights trivia on the 21st. So Seamus, do you want to talk about our little Halloween costume party?
Yeah, so we are on, well, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the 28th of October, right?
No, that's right. Yep.
Okay, just at least got that much right. We are hosting our own Halloween party / costume contest at the Mellow Mushroom Pizzeria and Bar on iDrive or International Drive across from SeaWorld. So if you're local and you know the area, that's where we're going to be on that night. We're inviting everyone to come down and just kind of hang out. Really no real plans, but just want to meet the community, those that listen to us. Maybe you don't listen to us, or you just started listening to us, or you've been listening to us since the beginning, and you wanted a chance to just hang out and meet, share a drink with us, and swap stories. Yeah, it'll be a fun night. Just something to kind of like do. We also kind of co-hosting in a way. Is it Pizza Sam?
Pizza
I
Queen
forget
Sam.
her name. Pizza Queen Sam. She has created her own pizza for this event. So if you or someone that's into pizza like we are, or I'm sure many people are, that's something to check out. We've also been given the ability to come up with our own drinks, which are on the menu for the next 30 days or for the month of October, even though we're already 2 weeks in or a week and a half in. So each of us got to create our own like drink or some sort of special menu item. And yeah, it'll be a fun night. Don't really know what else to to say about it, but
Yeah, just a fun hangout night. It's we wanted to do another event, but we didn't want to plan much. Always wanted to hang out a little bit. So yeah, it's a little Halloween costume pizza party. You said October 28th. It's at 7 p.m. That's when we're going to kind of kick it off. So we'll be there at that point. And you did mention we did get to create some drinks. So we each kind of created our own drink. Me and Seamus both sort of proxied Jamie's drink in there because she wasn't with us when we went over there. But all the drinks are $6, which is like a steal for drinks, honestly. And these are on, like you said, the menu for the whole month. So I created the Lil Boozy, which I think is actually a cocktail that Universal is selling at their resort. I just saw. I didn't even know that was theirs, but yeah, it's a pumpkin ale with a butter shots. If you've seen me on the last couple episodes, that's sort of my go-to. Seamus has the Drunken Dragons margarita, which is the El Jimador tequila, and it's a pomegranate and blue curacao. So it's got the little red and blue floater in there, which gives it a really cool look. And then for Jamie's, she loves those ciders. So we got a really cool, it's an elderberry cider. I always want to say elderflower, but it's an elderberry cider. And we did a float of Screwball peanut butter whiskey in there. So it tastes like a peanut butter and jelly. So we call that the PB and Jamie. So yeah, that's what we got. And then for the entire month of October, we also have, like I said, if you go to Instagram, you can see this post tagged. We have a little coupon for everyone that listens. So you can get 10% off your food, dine in or takeout. You just have to show them the little image that we have. And then also if you're a character or, again, somebody that works at Horror Nights, they're offering a little free pretzel bite option for that whole month of October with the purchase of a pizza. So we tried to set these up in a way that not only can we host a cool event, but how can we sort of give back to the people that give us this event? We don't really have much to offer. We are a small podcast and we just like to have fun, but we want to find a way to somehow use our platform to thank those that give us these months of scares. So that's kind of what we're working with. So I know that's a lot of information, but you can follow us on our socials if you're not already, and you'll see all of that kind of being worked out. So yeah, that's what we got going on. I know it's a lot. Let's get into it. I got a little Sam Adams Oktoberfest. 'Tis the season. This survived the hurricane. Had a couple beers left over, so might as well crack into this while the season is still fitting. Oh man, it just hits so good every time. So let's go into scare zones first. Let's just start because we're gonna we can talk locations a little bit once we get into it, but we're gonna do it sort of as a whole. We have. How should we do it? Or yeah, we'll skip. No, let's do icons. So we had Oddfellow. We had Dr. Oddfellow at 32, and then this year we have Sinister and Surreal. I have to say, we've talked about it last week. I do feel like the overall theming of Sinister and Surreal don't really match up to the level of Dr. Oddfellow as of last year. I know both zones are sort of subpar, if we had to like really say it like that, but the overall theming, it definitely felt more Oddfellow-y versus Sinister and Surreal. They kind of have their opening zone and then they sort of branch into one zone apiece, whereas Oddfellow loosely tied into every zone last year. But where do you land on like Oddfellow versus Sinister and Surreal?
I think I would prefer Oddfellow, but I think that's also because Oddfellow was kind of treated as an icon. I don't know if these two are treated necessarily as an icon. Obviously, we're going to treat them as such because that's kind of how they're being presented. But I think as like just an overall story, even if his was kind of already loosely created in some ways, I just feel like there was more effort put into his being at the event last year than they were at this year's event. So I just think there's something lacking with the two of them. And I don't think that they weren't ever going to be able to match what they were going for with Oddfellow.
Yeah, and like with Oddfellow, they tossed him a full-on house too, so that like
Right.
we'll get to the house later on, but that obviously helps build that background of character, and it does help, I think, having that history and like tying it into, you got like the Jack the Clown rub, if you want to use wrestling terms. He got a little bit of notoriety just because it's like, oh, we know Jack the Clown, we get that, so it's like we're kind of playing off of his story a little bit. Whereas Sinister and Surreal are completely original concepts. They have no ties to the actual HHN lore, no house. The scare zone was just called Duality of Fear. So like on the surface, you don't even know it's theirs, versus Oddfellow, where his name is literally in the scare zone's name. So I think I have to give the nod to Oddfellow. Obviously, I don't know if we got the same treatment. Like if Sinister and Surreal had maybe their own house, maybe we'd have a different story because we'd have more to base them off of. But
Yeah.
I think it's an uphill battle that I don't think they can kind of win against Oddfellow. But let's get into scare zones, because this is where those icons or theming really ties in deeper. So last year we had, for scare zones, Dr. Oddfellow's Collection of Horror up in that front lot area. Hollywood, we had Dark Zodiac. Central Park, we had Jungle of Doom, Expedition Horror. New York was Vamp 69, Summer of Blood. And then San Francisco, we had Shipyard 32, Horrors Unhinged. Now, Dr. Oddfellow, in the backstories, had presence in all of these. He's sort of a shapeshifter being. So he did have his hands very loosely into these zones. If you didn't know any of the backstory and didn't listen to the podcasts, you wouldn't outright know, oh, this character is Dr. Oddfellow in disguise. They just kind of look like very disjointed scare zones. Whereas, this year, they don't tie the icons into all of them. They tie Sinister into one and they tie Surreal into one. So for the scare zones this year, of course, we have Duality of Fear, which is right up front in that little, they call it front lot now, but you have Demon Queens over in Hollywood. You have Central Park, which is Swamp of the Undead. You have Torture Fair in New York, and you have Enter the Blumhouse in San Francisco. Now, Torture Fair is sort of Sinister's area, and Demon Queens is Surreal's sort of area. So I guess we can start at the very front. And I know we weren't going to do this kind of one-on-one, but I think it for scare zones that at least makes more sense. So front, Oddfellows zone versus Duality of Fear. It's they're both lacking, I think is safe. I think Oddfellow they had props. Duality just has chainsaws. So how do you compare these two as like an entrance to the event?
Yeah, I don't think there's really much of a contest. I think last year's is as weak as last year's was. It's not nearly as bad as what it is this year. Like this year, they put an entryway and gave it a name. Yeah. There's really nothing to it. Yeah, they'll sit out there and talk to people, but it's not. There's nothing really. There's not much to it. It's not really a scare zone. They can call it a scare zone, but it's not a scare zone. Just because they stuck the chainsaws there doesn't make it, as far as I'm concerned, a scare zone. Now, be that as it may, the one upside to it is they did stick all the chainsaws there. So deal with them up front or as you're leaving, and that's it. Deal with them the rest of the night. They don't try to ham fist them into like different scare zones just because, they need to have the chainsaws somewhere. But as of, if we're comparing the two, Dr. Oddfellows at least made sense as far as the overall theming was concerned. And for me, if it's a personal choice, I'd rather have it make sense compared to everything, have everything kind of tie in some ways. This didn't really tie in. This doesn't really tie into anything other than to say that, oh, well, it's sinister and surreal. And like, this is one person's scare zone and this one's going to be in this scare zone. It doesn't really mean much in the grand scheme of the event itself. So, I don't really compare the two. I think it's hard to compare them because one isn't really much of a scare zone at all. And the other one at least tried to offer something.
Yeah, it's tough. It's just that little front lot area, whether it can work or not, we have yet to see it work. I don't know what it is. I don't know if they're afraid to put too many big props right up front. I thought if you go back to 31 with the Pumpkin Lord, like there was enough props there to make it like, okay, I can view that as a scare zone, not to compare 3 years now, but it just seems like, I don't know if they're afraid because they don't want congestion or what, but there's just such a lack of effort in the design up front. So I think Oddfellow will obviously, I prefer that one. Now let's go over to New York because this is the interesting one because I think these two compare pretty well. Dark Zodiac versus Demon Queens. They have the same vibe. They have the purple. The only difference really, the costuming is phenomenal on both ends. The music, the atmosphere is there. The only two differences I see are Dark Zodiac had the chainsaws and it was a little bit longer. Now, Demon Queens is a little bit more kind of, I don't want to say congested as if it's a bad way, but they shrunk it so they could pack it in there more and it felt more full. So I don't know which way you really lean. I probably go towards Demon Queens because the chainsaws, I just didn't see them fitting there, but I do think that Zodiac had maybe more street interactions because like the Demon Queens are just sort of on that center statue and they do the little show and then they kind of walk around, whereas Dark Zodiac had like very distinct little sets and all the set pieces in Demon Queens are just like the purple portal kind of things. But what do you prefer?
I probably would prefer Demon Queens just because for me, a lot of it has to do with the fact that I can see what's going on. I can like get an understanding of what they're going for. I think with Zodiac, although it was cool, it was so dark, it was hard to really see the characters up close unless you got like really, really close to them. there was something lacking in last year's Scare Zone compared to this year's, that at least this one feels a little bit more compact, a little more tight, dialed in, whereas the Zodiac one kind of just was very almost too esoteric. It's really hard to. I mean, I understand that it was like based on zodiacs, but if you don't know what that is, like I don't know much about it other than the fact that like I'm a Taurus. But like other than that, I really don't know what that means.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of storytelling involved in it. Not that I'm saying you need to make like this long drawn out story for a Scare Zone, but at least it needs to kind of make sense. And it didn't really make a lot of sense last year, and this year at least, you know, we get the idea that, you know, these individuals are, you know, icons of sinister or surreal, whatever one it is. It feels like there's more to it than just necessarily, hey, here's a bunch of random characters in costume.
Yeah, I tend to go towards Demon Queens as well. I love the costumes in Zodiac. I think it would be a great house. I just don't know if they really pulled it off as a zone necessarily. So we'll keep walking. We're going to go towards Central Park now. So this is where we have the Swamp of the Undead from this year going against Jungle of Doom, where again, this sort of similar vibes in each. They both sort of picked a setting that could easily translate into that tree covered area that we know and love. I just think this is trickier. Swamp of the Undead definitely like laid with the fog a little bit better. Jungle of Doom had less props. I don't know. Where are you leaning towards these two?
I'd probably go Swamp of the Undead.
Yeah.
I think I wasn't super high on it to begin with this season, but the more I've done it, it's grown on me. So I kind of prefer this one.
Yeah, I like the less fog approach. I like that they put the set pieces a little bit spread out furthermore onto like the sides and the back area, so that way it made the pathway seem a little bit better. It hasn't gotten, other than, you know, peak time in the night, it doesn't seem too overcrowded or like too congested. Whereas I think the swamp it kind of did because the props made the pathway that much more narrow. I do really like that up front, you know, semi show with the character grabbing, you know, the jewel and pulling it down. I thought that was fun. I think that's something that is sort of lacking at the entrance of this zone. There's not really a full on start to it. But I think I'd still go Swamp of the Undead as well. I just like the fog, that misty, like they keep having that like little water spray in there, so it just feels gross. Or the fact that it's rained every goddamn day at Horror Nights this year, it kind of fits that vibe a little bit more. But I'll go with Swamp of the Undead as well. So we'll continue all the way over now to the San Francisco area. So San Francisco is Enter the Blumhouse this year, going against Shipyard 32. Not a lot of action between these two. This is a tricky one. At least with Shipyard 32, it was like trying to be a scare zone versus Enter the Blumhouse, which is trying to just kind of be that photo op-y style zone, which I guess there's a place for it at the event, depending on how well you execute it. I like aspects of Enter the Blumhouse, but then there's bits and pieces that make me think, damn, like it feels like they went 50% versus going 100%. We've talked about this before with having props and giving them more stuff to work with in that zone. So I know we were low on 32, but where are you in this little matchup?
I think I'd rather Shipyard, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's only because the Blumhouse feels so phoned in. Feels like they had to find something to put there, and they didn't really have anything, so they were like, let's just do Blumhouse again. We've got the costumes. And I think that kind of sucks, to be honest with you. It's boring. They don't do enough with it. How you don't even have a Megan horde in that area and just the one little Megan doesn't make any sense to me.
That's. I mean, they did it last year.
I'm not wild about it.
They had the whole horde thing last year, then they abandoned it, which you would think when you're going to do a Blumhouse zone with a Megan I figured, I think the thing that hurt it was dumping Major Sweets' exit right there, because if they were to do it, they might have put that little stage back where they had like Conjure the Dark stage and have the Megans up there and stuff like that. But it's tricky. I'll still probably go Blumhouse, honestly. That's just how much I really did not like Shipyard 32. I couldn't get over the poor costumes. And we talked this year a lot about like repurposed stuff, but man, that was a completely repurposed zone 100%. And all they had in there was really the crane and the bus. And I don't know. I couldn't really get past it completely. So I think I'm going to go Blumhouse just because I just really just didn't like 32 Shipyard 32. But yeah, so let's head over to New York, because this is where like the big one is. And we had Vamp 69 versus the Torture Fair, which I'm kind of blanking once we keep tossing all these different years about. They use the same space, very similar builds again. You have those little side booths and whatnot. So you have them slinging merch and doing hookah at Vamp 69, and in this one they have just one booth, it seems like, with the guy with like the little head crusher thing, and then you have the brazen bull, and then the blood eagle.
There's a bunch of them.
Yeah, the blood eagle is one of them.
A blood eagle, and then like the arrow, shooting the guy at the arrow, whatever.
Right. I do feel the vibe of wanting to hang out at Vamp 69 more. I know it got old towards the end of the season because the playlist was just not as long as it probably should have been. But it was just kind of a fun vibe. Torture Fair, I do enjoy still walking to and through, but I don't ever feel the need to be pulled there necessarily. I don't know if that rings to you as well, but...
No, I definitely would go Vamp 69. I think just if I'm comparing the two based on wanting to spend time in the zone, obviously by far it's Vamp, because the music and everything kind of just felt kind of like a music festival, whereas this year I like the Scare Zone. Like, I like Torture Fair. I think it's, for something that seems kind of generic, it definitely does a good enough job at bringing you into the idea of a King Arthur's Fair or something along those lines. But at the same time, I think we talked about it a little bit, I don't know if in the last episode, the episode before, I just don't think that they're not doing enough to really suck you into that world. At least last year, maybe they could get away with it a little bit better because it was really just music. This year, they might have had to do a few more things, but I just feel like there isn't enough interaction, and it doesn't feel like, it's taking you into a different world. I don't know. It's
not
close.
as immersed.
I think maybe it's closer for me than I want to admit, but I still think that I would prefer Vamp over
this is close to me too, because
Fair.
I think I enjoyed both of these Scare Zones the most out of all the Scare Zones in their respected years. So I think it is definitely close for me. I think I'm with you going to Vamp 69 just because I did like maybe it's just the fact that it's more of a music zone versus a scare zone that might give it that edge, because it does draw you there, and I do enjoy hanging out there and just having fun and like kicking back, versus like Torture Fair. I don't necessarily like am drawn to be like, yeah, let's go hang out in Torture Fair and like get chased by the jester with the little bells or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's a fun zone, and I do like what they did, but I don't feel as immersed. I don't know if that has anything to do with the fact that it's supposed to be an icon zone and it's not tied in. Maybe I would like to see maybe some more interaction with the king and queen, because it does feel like they have that little stage presence. They open the Iron Maiden and then shut it with their little torturer guy, and that's kind of it. I have seen people pledge their loyalty to Sinister up there at some point or another. And maybe it's the fact that we haven't roamed around there that much that it's hitting as well as Vamp had. And I think, like I said, I think we kind of, I don't want to say got sick of Vamp, but it did, lose a little bit of its luster towards the end just because it got very repetitive with those songs. But I think comparing these two, I would still go Vamp because it just, I don't know, it vibed better, I think. So that's our scare zones. Let's get into some houses. So I think the fairest way to do houses is not locations because those bounce around between IPs and originals and everything like that. So why don't you talk about the IPs a little bit, the IP lineup, 32 versus 33, and then we can kind of, we could talk a little bit individually about the houses, but we don't have to talk about one-on-one matchups and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think especially considering that like they've changed some of the layouts in certain areas, and plus we've got 2 new tents this year than we did last year. So let me open up, because I can't remember everything off the top of my head. Let me open up last year. So for 32, we had for IPs, we had Chucky Ultimate Kill Count, which was at the Fast and Furious location previous to this season. So they've changed that up a little bit. But it had to do with obviously Chucky. You were walking through the Chucky factory and learning about all the gruesome ways that Chucky killed people. Used a lot of the scenes from the show. So if you were familiar with the Chucky show, a lot of that was translated into the house. Pretty fun. I didn't hate it as much as everyone else did, but obviously I know that some people didn't like it versus other people who did like it. But either way, The Last of Us, which was the big one, the big popular one everybody was waiting for, always did 2-hour waits, was never something that was like walk on ever. Unless you waited till like 2:00 in the morning, you might have had a chance to just walk in. But based on obviously the video game of the same name by Naughty Dog and Sony, and you have to get through abandoned Pittsburgh with Joel and Ellie. Not much we can say much more about that. I mean, if you know what the game is or know what the show is, you'll know what the house was like. Stranger Things 4, which was the Stranger Things house based on the newest season, so season 4, obviously had Vecna in it. Usual cast of characters, typical Stranger Things.
Yep.
Exorcist Believer, which I think we all read agreeably, have decided that it was the biggest surprise last year. I think we all kind of agreed that it was one of the bigger surprises. Wasn't expecting a whole lot from it, but it ended up being like incredibly scary, really well done, based on a movie that hadn't been released yet. So
risky
they did a
move.
pretty good job. Yeah, and then obviously the last one is the pseudo IP Universal Monsters Unmasked, which famously is Seamus's favorite Monsters house, and it's not close. Based on some new characters, new characters to the event: Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Phantom of the Opera, Hunchback, and Invisible Man. And then for this year, going up against it, I don't know why I need to look this up. I've been going enough this year, but this year I think we only have 4 IPs. So this one, I don't want to say it's unfair necessarily, but we are definitely competing, one extra IP against the 4 this season. But the 4 this year is obviously A Quiet Place, which hasn't quite lived up to the expectations I think people had set for it. I know that for myself, it doesn't really meet the expectations I had. I may have been expecting a little bit more than other people had, so I don't know if that affects that or not. But based on the Quiet Place movies, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, based on the movie of the same name, this might be the bigger surprise for this season. I don't know how people feel about that, but I was super low on it, and I'm appreciating it a lot more than I expected I would. Insidious The Further, don't need to say much about it other than it's incredible. This house is awesome. This house gets better every time I do it. If you haven't done this one yet, or if you weren't sure you wanted to do it when you got here, you'd be doing yourself a disservice. So please check out the Insidious house. And then obviously our pseudo IP Universal Monsters. This one is Eternal Bloodlines. This is the one that's based on existing characters, but the female characters or the female versions of those characters. We have Saskia Van Helsing, who is teamed up with the Bride of Frankenstein to face off against Dracula's daughter and her monstrous alliance. You have to go through the house to figure out who that is. But yeah, this is, again, not anyone's favorite Monsters House. I don't think. I think
Yeah.
there's kind of a division amongst the community. Some people really like it. I think others don't like it as much. But I think they tried to maybe break off a little bit more than they had than they could chew with this story. But I digress. It's not the worst Monsters House. I just don't think it's necessarily anywhere near the best either.
No.
But yeah, so unfortunately this year we only have the 4 IPs. We don't actually have full 5. So comparing the two will be kind of interesting. I don't know. Do you want to kind of give your comparison first, or do you want me to kind of break down how I feel?
I'd say what we can do just quickly. We could kind of just do monsters because those are
Okay.
easiest. I think you said it in your little like.
Oh yeah, for me it's
blurbs.
Unmasked.
Yeah, 100%.
By far.
And you even said it that Eternal Bloodlines. You're not sure if it's the worst monster. For me, it's hands down in the very bottom. It's in the cellar. It's just compared to the other ones. Like 29 was just so good. The Bride of Frankenstein Lives. I liked, but I think it fell a little bit for me just based on the fact that we saw it for 2 years essentially. Like we as locals, I went through it so often during the HHN Light days that I didn't necessarily go through it a lot when the event actually came around. So I think it might have just overall fallen for me. I do appreciate it for what it was. Legends Collide. I know we've talked in the past where it's sort of like iffy. I didn't hate it, but it's a lot of the same problems with this house. But it had scares, and it was only the 3 of them. Last year, one of my favorites. And then we have this year, it's just in the bottom for me. It's just the story falls flat. It's too convoluted. It just doesn't make sense for me. So I think Unmasked is the clear winner, and we can kind of push that off of our IP board almost. But
yeah,
when it comes to other IPs now, this is when it gets a little bit trickier. So like if we're looking scare factors, right? You got Exorcist and Insidious. I think those were the 2 scariest ones. And then for like that fun style house, I think you can line up Ghostbusters and Stranger Things pretty evenly. And then I think for that Last of Us Quiet Place, I think those sort of theme very well together. And then you just kind of have Chucky. Chucky is like, I guess the caveat. It's just sort of like that little extra. It's like a buy 2 get 1, and you don't really need 3 of something. But you're, you like deals, so you buy 2.
You can almost compare Chucky to Sweets, even because like they're both very similar in theming. So,
yeah. But yeah, so for Chucky, it's kind of. I mean, that was my least favorite house of the year.
Yeah, I don't think either of us liked it very much. I don't even Jamie. I mean, I know Jamie was more high on it than we were, but
yeah. But yeah, I was taking a swig of beer. But yeah, it's just I view that sort of just as a non-factor almost. But I guess we can kind of go into that scary factor where it's Insidious versus Exorcist. I think Insidious is by far, maybe not by far, but I think it is scarier. The fact that these casts clicked so quickly is amazing. And I do think, if I remember correctly, like Exorcist, I think fired pretty early for me as well, because it was such a surprise factor. It's like, wow, how did they get these roles down so quick? Maybe not to the extent that Insidious did, but I do remember it clicking pretty quickly for me. And again, both of these were sort of a surprise a little bit. Like Insidious we thought was going to be good because we liked the series, but I know people were sort of on the fence about it. But I haven't really heard anybody say anything bad about Insidious other than, and this isn't even bad, but I know Jonathan from 365 has not gotten a good run yet, so he really like doesn't have much love for it yet. I'm sure the time will come, because I'm on the flip side of Jonathan. I haven't really had a bad run through this house. Maybe one where they were sort of lacking characters in certain spots, but other than that, the other 10, 11, or 12 runs of this house have been phenomenal. I think I just view Exorcist and Insidious very similar. I'll give the nod probably in the scare category to the Insidious one, but what about you when you look at those ones?
I'll give it to Insidious. I just think that as I said before, I feel like there's just something different about it than you typically get with other houses. I think I don't know if it's the length or just the effect of the scares that they put in it, how well it translates the movie into a haunted attraction without convoluting the story or making it so hard to understand that you need to watch the movies to understand it. I think there's just, if you're even like remotely familiar with any of the Insidious movies, you're going to get something out of it. Plus, it's just darn scary. It's a scary house. Like, they do really good job of, sucking you in and not giving you a moment to breathe. Like, there's not a very good like stretch of house that, okay, well, I can take a moment to gather my wits, but this one is just boom, boom, boom. It just gets you every other room.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not really much of a comparison for me. I think The Exorcist was good because of how surprisingly good it was, and like you, I don't think it took me more than 1 or 2 runs to be like, that was sick, like that was really good. But I feel like there's just more to this one, more variety, and I don't know. I think part of it's also just, again, the length. I think being as long as it is,
A
like,
long house.
you
It's
definitely
like
get
6 minutes long.
you get that, like, this is still going type of
Yeah, it's
like
please
surprise, and
end.
it still
Please stop.
happens. Right. Even like 5 or 6 runs later, I'm still getting the same feeling of like, damn, this takes a long time to get through.
Another dummy
So
room.
it's
What the hell?
close. I think it's close, but I think the Insidious is a better house. I think Insidious is probably like, of the 5 years that I've gone to now, like top 3, not even, maybe even higher as far as just overall house,
Yeah,
just of how well it's done, of how good it is. So
it's up there.
I know people are sick and tired of hearing people sing its praises, but it
It is that
really
good.
is. It really is that good.
Yep. So let's get into the fun houses then. Ghostbusters versus Stranger Things. They have that similar vibe. I think Ghostbusters and Stranger Things 4 both surprised us, but for different ways. I think Stranger Things 4 sort of surprised us as to how they dropped the ball on certain scenes, whereas Frozen Empire has surprised me time and time again. The other night I had probably the best run through this house I've had this season. And it was late at night and it was a slow night and I was the only one there, but in that little scare room that like has like the Gracchus and the Vega, like I took the corner and all I could see was like blue shining light and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like I can't see. I'm like trying, like, where do I go? And then like I kind of pull back a second and I was like, oh, the Gracchus is right in my face. Those are the eyes. Like he was just staring at me. I couldn't see. I was blinded. I was like, oh my God. And he kind of peeled away and then came back out into my face. And then every single scare after that, they came out right into me. The little librarian ghost chased me, or is it the librarian? I forget which one it is, but the last character in that room like chased me out of that room. It was such a good run. I really do like this house. It's growing on me more and more every time. And then Stranger Things 4, I think because I love the Stranger Things season so much that I sort of, I don't give it a pass. I can see its faults, but I still very much enjoyed it. It was the first house I did. It was the last house I did. And I enjoyed it. So I can't decide quite yet, but why don't you give your piece and then maybe I'll have a decision.
I think between the two, I'm gonna still pick Stranger Things. I think that house, for all its faults, was well done, and it did enough to capture the magic of that 4th season. And it didn't feel like it was trying to ham fist too much in from other seasons just to, grab the attention of people that maybe have given up on the show or just don't care about it as much as they used to. I think it did a really good job. I think some of the scenes in that house were really, really well done. The scale of some of those scenes were really good. And Ghostbusters, for as much as I'm enjoying it this year, how much I'm surprised I'm enjoying it, I didn't think I'd like it that much. I do actually enjoy every run I've done so far. I just don't know if there's enough personally for me to like pick it over last year's. I think Stranger Things I just got more of a connection to than Ghostbusters, and that kind of pushes it up above it for me. Mm-hmm. But I can see why people are really high on the Ghostbusters house because it is. I mean, it's really well um, uh, executed. I think it works really well, and the scare actors do a good job, and all the scenes are varied and bring you right into the movie and make you feel like you're in that world. So they do a good job both in both. So
Yeah, it's tricky. I think I might have to go Ghostbusters. I think I have to take my bias of
the
my
movie.
love for Stranger Things 4 out, and I have to like view it as a house. I think Frozen Empire works better as a house for me. But let's go into that similar category. I guess we can call it post-apocalyptic, where it's A Quiet Place versus The Last of Us. I think The Last of Us we probably did the least amount as we did last year. I think Quiet Places, I've done it more than Last of Us already because the wait time for Last of Us was just ridiculous. It wasn't, for me, it wasn't necessarily worth it because I didn't have that love for the IP as much as I do like for A Quiet Place. I haven't really played the games. I played a little bit of it last year, but I never really got super into it. Uh, but what do you compare these two? How do you like these two?
Um, I think they're very much the same in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Just two different properties, but dealing with the same idea. Um, Post-apocalypse, maybe, obviously one's an alien, the other one's more of an infection, one's more zombies, the other one is more sci-fi. So it really comes down to which of the two properties I prefer. I'm gonna have to. It's slight. It's a very slight difference. I think they're very close to each other, but I'm gonna give it to Quiet Place because at least they're trying to do something different with A Quiet Place.
Yeah.
And it felt like The Last of Us was more of just a straight beat for beat. This is the game. This is the show. This is now a house.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And yeah, I think because of that, I would rather A Quiet Place. As much as A Quiet Place is struggling, I think at least they're trying to do something different with it. Trying to do something different with it. Even if it is pretty puppet heavy, I think that's fine. But they are doing different effects. You are getting certain areas where they're going to kind of throw it up a little bit on you, like change it up on you. And what you don't expect to be the scare is the scare and so forth. Mm-hmm. I think that to me just gives it a little bit more of an edge.
Yeah, A Quiet Place is growing for me because I have been able to do it more now. I've been doing some later nights where the weights are dropping. The rain has scared people away on certain nights. I've been doing A Quiet Place more and more. And again, kind of like Ghostbusters, I'm enjoying it more and more. So I think because maybe I'm doing it more, but maybe I like the source material better. But I also do think it's a better house than Last of Us. I really do. Based off of pretty much what you said as well, I think that they're trying stuff. Whether all the puppets work for you or not, they don't necessarily work for me. I don't like that many puppets. I like the characters, but it's trying something different. It tried this whole the ASL approach, the very quiet aspect, that deadening tunnel in the beginning. I wish that they repeated that a couple times in various spots because that is that gives you the feeling that the movie instills in you, where it's like you have to be quiet. You don't know what's around you. Something could come out at any time. I think that tunnel should have been extended or repeated in some other part of the house because I think that was, for me, one of the best parts of the house. But the scenic in this house is really good. The scenic in both were actually really well done, I think. The scale in Last of Us was big, and then the way you can travel through A Quiet Place, you go through the corn, you go through the silo, you come on the dock, you go into the bunker area. I think it's all very well done. So I think I'm just going to I have to give it to A Quiet Place though, because like you said, it tries something a little bit different. There's some fun stuff in there. I don't think there's a scare in any of these houses that I've ever done like that deadening hallway with the giant puppet, where I have that uncertain feeling in me every time I go through because it's so pitch black. You don't think it's right next to you, and it is. You're like, oh no, I definitely walked past it. Nope, it's actually right in my face right now. It gets me every single time. I always am like, all right, I've been walking for like a while. Like we're almost done with this hallway. And nope, I'm halfway through, and that little fucker's still there. So, so that definitely gets me still. And then of course we have Chucky. So just looking at overall, which IPs do you think lineup wise do you prefer?
I think overall, I'm going to give it to. Thought I had this answer ready to go.
It's a little bit trickier once you start thinking.
It's harder than you think about, because obviously last year you get the one extra IP, the standard 5. This year we don't really have the 5; it's just the 4. I'm gonna have to go last year.
Really?
And
Okay.
even taking Chucky out of it, I think if you just put up the 4 we talked about compared to the 4 this year, the Monsters house for me is that much better.
That gives
Like,
it an
a
edge.
lot better.
It does.
Again, I prefer Stranger Things just as a property. And then as much as I was down on Last of Us, I felt like they did it well. So if you're a fan of the game or the fan of the show, you're going to get a lot out of it. And then obviously, Exorcist was such a surprise that it was really, really good. This year, I think, unfortunately, Insidious is having to pick up a lot of slack. So for as good as Insidious is, the other 3 are pretty weak comparably. Whereas at least last year, it felt like with those 4 anyways, there was a lot to get out of all of them. And they were all kind of pulling their own. They were all kind of pulling their share. Chucky was Chucky. Chucky was okay, but the other 4 were definitely all good in a lot of their own ways and pulled some of the weight away from other houses. This year, I don't know if all of the IPs really are equally that good. I think that the Insidious is really good, and I think that is making up for some of the faults that the others currently have. But do you feel differently? Do you feel this year is better?
Yes, I think so. I really don't like the monsters. I don't like the monsters. The monster is the one part that like draws me to that, because I know they give them the original stories, but we're kind of viewing it as the IP characters that they chose. And I like the characters that they chose last year. But I think looking at Insidious obviously is like the heavy hitter. I think the fact that Ghostbusters and A Quiet Place right now are rising for me versus Last of Us, which kind of stayed stagnant, and Exorcist didn't necessarily rise for me. It rose for me that first week once I saw it, and then after that, I was like, "Oh, this is a good house. I do enjoy it." I don't care about Chucky. That I don't like. I don't really like the character at all. Whether talking house related or not, I don't really care for that series. The TV show season 1 was good, but other than that, the movies I could care less for. But it's tricky because I love Stranger Things 4. That's the one that pulls me towards 32. But again, that wasn't even the best IP house last year, so it's tough. But I think I would lean towards this year just based off of what we've seen so far. So let's dive into the originals now a little bit. We'll just go through these. So last year we had Dr. Oddfellow's Twisted Origin. We had Dueling Dragons, Choose Thy Fate, Yeti, Campground Kills, The Darkest Deal, and Blood Moon Dark Offerings. Now, that is a tough list. Just now, like reading them back again, I'm getting all those flashback memories of these houses. It's like, oh wow, you kind of forget how stacked it was.
Right.
Versus really this year, where we have Slaughter Cinema 2, which is an HHN staple at this point, Goblin's Feast, Major Sweets Candy Factory, The Museum Deadly Exhibit, Monstros, The Monsters of Latin America, and then Triplets of Terror. Now, this is the flip side of things, right? We have an extra original this year versus last year because that whole IP kind of thing. So this is tricky. How do we even begin to compare these? So I think we could just, for fun. All right. So your fun house, right? We have Goblin's Feast and we have Dueling Dragons. I think that's a pretty good comparison right there. For what it's worth, I do find myself thinking fondly of my Dueling Dragons runs at this point. They weren't scary. The stories, whatever. The dragon disappointment is there, but thinking back, I was like, wow, they tried something with that.
Because you know what my answer is going to be.
just
Are you
playing
playing
devil's
devil's
advocate.
advocate?
No, but I mean, I'm thinking back to it now, and I was like, as goofy as it was, especially since we're kind of comparing these in like the fun category, I guess. Um, the characters were goofy, the atmospheres were really cool. The little fairy zone or whatever was kind of the weak part of it, but I remember walking up to that castle entrance and taking that right and having the goblin there. The little frozen room was cool, and the fact that they did the whole multi-path thing was, I think, a ballsy move. And it was just a small little thing at the end, but it was still fun. Versus Goblin's Feast, I do have a blast with this house. This is um it's a better story. It is I think it's more fun because it knows what it is. It doesn't say I'm just a fantasy house. It says I'm a very ridiculous fantasy concept. I'm not, Dueling Dragons, I don't think was trying to have fun or like be a goofy house by any means. It wasn't supposed to be scary, but I think it was supposed to be like realistic fantasy versus Goblin's Feast, which is like, this thing is bizarre. We know how ridiculous this is. So why don't you give your spiel and I'll give my pick. I don't even think you have a
Everything
spiel. You might just have an answer, but
is the reason why I'd go goblins.
yeah, because it knows what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's more fun.
Mm-hmm.
There's just more to it. I still think it's ridiculous, but I find myself giggling and laughing for good reasons the entire time that I'm in that one. And dragons, I mean, for a Dueling Dragons house, the one scene you get dragons in, it is the most like disappointing. Like you talk about how like, and we'll get to this house, but you talk about how like monstrous, how its ending is so
Yeah.
like the whole like point of that house, Dueling Dragons, and your two dragons are fire breathing or are smoke breathing paper mache lizards that you can't even really see unless you look for them.
Static.
That's the whole that's all you get for dragons. The rest of the house are weird ice and fire goblin demons fighting for the soul of a book and Merlin who's attached to a tree. Like you might as well just call this house Dueling Dweebs for that point, for that matter, because it literally had nothing to do with dragons. And you're gonna say, well, it's about the ride, it's about the roller coaster. I don't care. I don't care what it's about. You said dueling dragons. Okay, let's make it about dueling dragons, not Merlin got caught in a tree and is you. I don't. Whatever. I'm not going to go on and on about it. I've already done that more than times that I can count. But
yeah, you can go listen to our last year's episodes.
Yeah, I just no. I mean, it's goblins, and it's not close.
Yeah. I will also pick goblins. I do have more fun in this house. I just had to play devil's advocate. But yeah, goblins is fun, man. You as soon as you walk in, you're dancing, right? You hear the little Celtic-y style music. Have a good Goblin's Feast. It's fun. Let's compare one house that spawned from the original house, and that would be Yeti Campground Kills going against Slaughter Cinema 2, because I think that they, while Slaughter Cinema 2 is sort of definitely very mashup-y, it did give us the whole Yeti run. So it's still, Yeti was a pretty ridiculous concept, the whole 50s campground aesthetic. Slaughter Cinema 2, I guess it might not necessarily be fair going against a compilation versus a one-off story, but I think it's the best we can do. So what do you think on these two houses? Like, I know it's a trickier subject, but
yeah, I mean, if you're comparing these two, it's kind of hard because one is its own consistent theme and the other is a mashup of different things. But if I had to pick one of the two, I think I'd go Slaughter. I think Slaughter Cinema is it really is good. Like it's doing what it set out to do, and I think it's living up to the original, even if I've never done it. And I love the Yeti house, but I think with Slaughter, I'm gonna remember this one more than I will the Yeti sequel. Although the Yeti sequel is better than the first Yeti, I still think that Slaughter takes it. It's close though. I think it's closer than I want to admit.
I think I'm gonna go Yeti Campground Kills. I just love that aesthetic. I really
Doesn't
do.
surprise me.
Yeah, I loved that aesthetic. I thought that they had that goofiness that you find in Slaughter Cinema. It is a little bit unfair maybe to judge the two because, like we said, they're compilation versus one-offs. But I really did like Yeti Campground Kills. I had so much fun with it. You had the baby Yetis. You had the shitty little kid that Billy that was
Billy.
beating on him. You had a lot of
Billy,
cool,
you little
innovative
bitch.
scares. Each Yeti was different, so that was fun. It didn't feel as repetitive. I'd go Campground Kills for that one. This one is going to be easy, I think. This is an easy one, but I feel like I have to compare them just because it was preemptively deemed this, and that would be The Darkest Deal against the Museum Deadly Exhibits. Now, it's the same house, like location, but I remember before it came out, everyone was saying this could be this year's
This
Darkest
one
Deal.
felt like this year's Darkest Deal. It did.
That's like what the vibes were. It set itself up to be that, or they I don't know if they were trying to do that, but that was what the community sort of.
No, but I agree with you there.
preemptively
I think it was definitely kind of, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, set up to be that. And I think we both agree that it fell flat in the attempt. I think we feel differently about how the house is, but if we're comparing this to Darkest Deal, I don't know if there's really much of a comparison. I don't think that you can.
Yeah, I mean, there's
I
no
don't think
chance for not picking Darkest Deal.
I don't
just
think
so
there's an
everyone
argument.
knows.
Yeah, I don't think there's an argument to be made that. I mean, I think that museum has a lot to offer. I think. Sorry, I'm sure you can still hear me. The cat took my headphones out. I think that museum has a lot to offer. I think there's more to it than some want to give it credit for, but at the same time, yeah, I don't see how this compares at all to Darkest Deal. Darkest Deal was just, let's take a story that very few people even think about on a regular basis and make an incredible house out of it. So Darkest Deal for sure, if I'm comparing the two, takes it by far.
I think so too. I mean, there is no comparison. Now, this is like a big what if too, because it's like the potential of a museum based house is so high still. I would still enjoy seeing an attempt at just like a normal museum, but yeah, and Darkest Deal just blows it out of the water. It's definitely the heavy hitter of the year. So museum is what it is. We'll probably talk more about that when we do our final like rankings and stuff like that. But for me, it's pretty low right now. Whereas Darkest Deal, I remember last year, it was like it kind of was one of the first rumors. It stuck around. We weren't sure about it. And then once we went to the house, we're like, oh, damn, this is sick. Like they did it. They did that thing. They told the story and we understood it. So it kind of, everything lined up perfectly. Now let's compare some more stuff that's in the same houses. This is going to be a tricky one, I think. Monstros, the Monsters of Latin America, going against Blood Moon Dark Offerings. Now, these are both some of your favorites. I know Blood Moon is. I don't necessarily know exactly where Monstros lands for you currently, but I know you enjoy it. But where do you piece
I like
these
Monstros. But I think this is unfair for me. Like, I feel like comparing the two, Blood Moon will always. I mean, Blood Moon again is still top 5. Blood Moon's incredible, and Blood Moon is very memorable too. Like, I'll never struggle to be like, what was Blood Moon like? What were the scenes like? I don't have those issues where like I remember that house like vividly, scene to scene.
Ingrained.
Monstros is good. I can see why it was so well respected from last year in LA, why they brought it over here. I 100% understand why they did that. Sorry, my camera's not, there you go. But yeah, if I had to compare the two, like if you were to say like, bullet to the gun to the head. Which one are you keeping? Which one are you getting rid of? It's easy for me. Blood Moon is staying. Like I just think Blood Moon is incredible. Like I like Blood Moon more than some of the houses that people think that I hold in such high regard. Like Blood Moon is way up there. So I don't. Yeah, it's got to be Blood Moon.
Yeah, I mean, not to tip my hand again, but Blood Moon takes it for me. I think that scale wise, it felt higher than Monstrose. I feel like Monstrose has a lot of small, like tavern style set pieces, whereas when we go into Blood Moon, like I think of like, the moon way off in the distance. I think of the giant clock tower. I think of the giant statue at the end. I think of how tall the church steeple was when we're going through the pews. In the little town center area, you have the Mayfair pole or whatever that is in the middle. Like it felt tall as a house versus Monstrose. Not that that's like a good or bad thing, but when both are firing on every other factor, you have to start nitpicking to these like really mundane things, right? Like I like the character design in both. Okay, that's a wash. I like the overall feel of both. That's a wash. The scares are kind of very similar. It's a wash. So like you have to start nitpicking these little things. Like, okay, well, I like that. And then you get to the ending. If you want to compare endings, right? You have that big witchcrafty, disfigured, like witch style static figure. I don't know what the term is. I'm just making up words at this point. But you remember what I'm saying? That giant statue at the end.
Yeah.
That was your ending for Blood Moon. It was like, wow, this is huge. And then you go to the ending of Monstrose, and it's like,
yeah,
we've already discussed the ending. So, it's just, it falls flat a little bit. So I have to give that one to Blood Moon as well. And then now we have, just from 32, we have just Oddfellows Twisted Origin left. And then from this year, we have Major Suites and we have Triplets of Terror. So I think when you compare, we can kind of compare the three against each other at this point, because Oddfellow does kind of line up with Major Suites a little bit because they're both based around HHN characters. Major Suites wasn't the icon level, but it's actually named and based after one of the characters. So Major Suites is just very fun. They redeemed that whole area. Oddfellow was same thing. It was fun, but it was like gross and dirty as well. Like you felt it. It was just like a car crash, and you had to watch it because it was just these crazy, just different little scares here and there, and these crazy figures. And it was just, I had so much fun in both of these houses. So that's tricky. And then you have Triplets of Terror, which is kind of on an island on its own. It's just its own little original concept. It's slasher based. It doesn't really pair up against anything well from 32. But where do you lean towards if any of these? We can kind of go 1 through 3, I guess. I for me, Triplets is at 3, and then the other two are kind of duking it out for 1 and 2.
Yeah, it's probably the same for me. I think it's Oddfellows at 1, and then
Suites
at 2, and then Triplets is a very distant 3, unfortunately. Yeah. Sorry, everybody. I know you all like it, but yeah, I think for me, it's Oddfellow is just very zany, out there, fit the character very much so. And then Suites is a great continuation or a great love note to the Scare Zone, and then Triplets of Terror is what it is. So yeah, I think I would put them in that order. Be interested to see how you order the other two yourself.
It's tricky. Honestly, I think I might have to be the same, but it's very close. I do love Oddfellows. The fact that, you look at the factory facade of 32, I think that pairs well up against the sprung tent being lit up like a circus tent facade. I think that those kind of wash out again when you're going down the list of like things. I think how the character was perceived in both houses was good on both ends. I thought the scares in both of them were innovative in both houses, and both on the same scare level. I don't think either house was like scary but the scares are kind of on par with one another. The miscellaneous characters, right? You have like you got Taffy, you have Miss Treats, you have the crazy little kids that are covered in candy and goo, versus in Oddfellows, like you have the bull with the ballerina, you had like the fish style character, you had all these other little zany characters. So like those kind of wash. It's a very tight race, but I think I would go again Oddfellows, Sweets, Triplets. So now overall, which events originals do you prefer? Do you like this year's or last year's?
I think I got to go last year. I think I got to go 32. I think overall you have, I just think they work all for the most part better than this year's. Darkest Deal is, really good.
Yeah. Yeah, you got Blood Moon.
I think for me, like the only original last year that wasn't good was Dragons. The others were all,
all very good,
pretty good. Like the IPs where it's like there isn't, one or two that are pulling all the weight. Like they were all equally good. And for all for everything I hate about it, Dragons at least, they put some effort into dressing it up, and I can see where the love is for it. I think it's stupid, but just because I think it's dumb doesn't mean everyone else does.
Yeah.
So I get the appeal of it for most people, but compare that to this year, and the museum isn't what it should have been. I think most of us can agree it's just not there. Goblins is good, and Slaughter is good. But for me, Triplets of Terror is just meh. Take it or leave it. And I think I don't know. I think, and it's probably closer. I think this is actually probably harder to make a decision on because I can see where both years have their positives and why you could go one way versus the other. But I think if I have to just take it first without thinking about it too hard, it's got to be 32. It's got to be last year.
Yeah, I'm on board with you as well. I do have to give the nod for 32 for the originals. I think that there was really no bad house, whereas I do think Museum is in that category for me right now.
Yeah.
But like you said, when you have Oddfellow, which I loved, you had Dueling Dragons, which I didn't hate, but I didn't love. It was just kind of there. You had Yeti Campground Kills, which I really enjoyed, and then you had Darkest Steel and Blood Moon, which are kind of all timers at this point. Versus this year, Slaughter Cinema 2, I really enjoy. Goblin's Feast, I enjoy. Major Sweets, I enjoy. Monstros is kind of just teetering for me. Triplets of Terror is fun, and I do enjoy it, but it has kind of become so repetitive for me that it's kind of losing steam. I think I really did enjoy it early on, and then now the more times I go through, I'm like, okay, like there's not as much here for me anymore.
Yeah.
And then Museum, which is at the very bottom for me. So I think because 32s was so steady, it was pretty much on the same wavelength as all the other houses. This year it's so up and down. Like there's some good houses, there's some mediocre houses, some not so great houses. But I also this year there's no like ultimate all-time discussion with any of these houses. I don't think anybody's going to look at any of these originals and say, you know what, I could actually make a strong point to put this in a top 10 or top 20 house of all time list. Like there's no house original wise this year that I could see somebody making that case for. Maybe Sweets, but even still, it's a little bit of a stretch. But I don't know. That's where we are at for this. I don't think we have to. I mean, which year would you prefer? I guess overall now. Now that we've discussed overall this year, including everything.
I think last year. I think this year is just we were kind of saying it before. I think this year just feels like, I don't know. I don't want to say lackluster, but it just doesn't feel like a typical HHN event. This one definitely, there's something missing this year, and I don't know what it is. Not to say that I'm not enjoying it. Like, I love going. I love being there. I love the season. So like, I'm always going to have something to look forward to in it. But I think if you're asking me to pick one versus the other, I'd rather last year's event than this year's event.
I'm right there with you. It just feels like there is some sort of little disconnect, and I don't know.
Yeah,
I can't quite put my finger on the pulse of it, of what it is. You know, is it the overall? Is it that there is no overall theme, or the theme that they tried to instill is not fully there? Is that it? I don't know. Is it because there's really not a big major IP that I personally love? Is that it?
right.
Could be. Yeah. I don't know. It is tricky, but I do think that I lean towards last year's event versus this year. I think in 5 years, if you're like, hey, you can go through all these houses or these houses, which lineup are you picking?
Right.
Probably 9 or 10 times out of 10 we'll be picking 32's event. So let us know what you guys think. This is always kind of one that we typically do towards the end of the season or after the season wraps, but our schedules have been shifted this year a little bit just based off of everything. So before we sign off, I do want to just shout out again the events that we have coming up. So October 21st, that is our HHN trivia event with all of the podcasts in the community, or just about all of them. Catacombs of Halloween Horror Nights, HHN365, RIP Tour, Horror Nights Gauntlet, Haunt Girls, and Rush of Fear pod. That's going to be Monday, October 21st at Top Golf. 8 p.m. is our kickoff, but get there early because I'm going to find a way to smash as many seats in there as I can. But again, we can only fit so many people. So get there early. 20% off food and beverage for any characters or HHN event workers. And then Monday, October 28th, 1 week after our trivia event, is our Halloween costume pizza party at Mellow Mushroom with Pizza Queen Sam. We're going to be holding a little costume contest, so come dressed up with your cool stuff. You can get our special Fear and Beer menu, one of our 3 drinks the whole month of October. It's only $6, but it's only at that iDrive location. And there's a coupon on our Instagram. So go to our Instagram, find that pinned post, and you can get it 10% off your food, dine in, or takeout. But I think that about wraps up this episode. Anything else for you at all? Or
nope, not really. I guess we could tease that. Keep an ear out for the next couple of new episodes whenever we get it done. But we have some changes coming to our sound when you first listen to us.
We're gonna adjust.
I don't want to give away too much, but nothing crazy. Just I think it's cool. We're switching some stuff up.
Yeah, we're gonna get a little fresh, and then also another little tease. If all the plans work out, we're gonna be filming something that in my mind could be very fun this weekend. I think on Sunday, you'll know what we're doing on Sunday if we do it. So keep your eyes peeled onto our social media because it's going to be a fun night. I have no idea how it's going to turn out, but I'm very excited to try it out. So I guess we'll see how it goes from there. But until next time, this is Nick.
And this is Seamus.
Happy haunts.
This place is cursed. Cursed. It's got a death curse.
You know, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare,
And again, I would just like to thank Vampire Stepdad for letting us use his music for our intro and outro music. So if you would, just go check him out. Spotify, Facebook. Again, that is Vampire Stepdad.